Hey, gang, welcome back for another episode of the podcast that reboots your thinking about farming, ranching, food systems, and the people that operate them. This is Ranching Reboot, and I'm your host, Brian Alexander. Today, we're heading to the heart of Texas to talk to someone who's building a regenerative paradise. But first, a few messages. Ranchers, are you ready to put your land to work for the planet and your profit margin? Then it's time for a Ranching Reboot with Grassroots Carbon. Grassroots Carbon helps you unlock the hidden potential of your soil through regenerative grazing practices. They'll help you build healthier pastures, increase biodiversity, and sequester carbon, all while boosting your bottom line. Join the regenerative revolution and partner with Grassroots Carbon. Visit www.grassrootscarbon.com/reboot to learn more and start earning carbon credits for your sustainable practices. Grassroots Carbon, your land, your legacy, rebooted. I got an email notification from Spotify that they are retiring the Q&A for the listener interaction section and replacing it with the leave comment feature. So for all those of you that watch the podcast on Spotify, let me know what you think using that leave comments thing. If you aren't watching on Spotify, maybe you could leave me a review for the podcast on whatever platform you use. That'd be really cool. All right. My guest this week is a visionary entrepreneur and a passionate advocate for regenerative ag. Mollie Engelhart returns for another episode. Last one was number 126, right at a year ago. We're going to talk about her move to Texas from California and learning to live on the plains instead of Southern California. She's going to share some stories of her ranch. We explore the innovative ways she's working to restore our connection to Earth. This is a conversation about food, family, the power of community to heal our planet. Get ready to be inspired, to be challenged, and to discover the beauty of a life lived in harmony with nature. This is the Ranching Reboot podcast, and this week's episode starts now. Hi, Mollie. Welcome back. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you for having me back.
Well, it's great to have you back. I missed your smiling face and your wonderful personality.
My wonderful personality. How does a vegan chef become a cattle rancher? It is a interesting personality that would do that.
There's crossover. I mean, I think that
Crossover.
there's a lot of crossover. I mean, look,
Yeah.
let's be honest, and I guess I'll just start this off in the first, 30 seconds, and let's just say that if it wasn't for CAFOs, vegans wouldn't have much of an argument.
They would not. I would say that. And that's what I've been saying is that I feel like regenerative agriculture should be the common ground. No pun intended or pun intended, actually, should be the common ground for all of us. But because the consolidated feedlot systems, because of the majority of pork raising in this country, it's the majority 99.99% of chicken raising in this country is horrific. I think that vegans have a point as to why they're angry. I just don't think I'm should be their enemy number one. But because I decided to take my vegan restaurants and transition them to regenerative agriculture focused restaurants, farm to table, nose to tail, and wild harvested, I've gotten a lot of blowback in the last couple of months. I guess it's only been about 6 weeks of the new menu, but there's been so much protests and so much pushback.
Why?
I'm a murderer,
Do they just not?
rapist. Like, I mean, it's really hard to have a logical argument because you'll say, let's say someone says, you're killing people. I mean, you're killing animals. And then I say, well, all food, there's death associated with all the food that we eat. And my plate is not have any less meat, any less death on it just because there's no meat on it than someone's plate that has meat on it. And then they'll say, well, no, the majority of crop death is to feed animals. And I will say, great. So if we go to grass-fed, grass-finished beef and other bovine as the primary source of protein for all of us, and we move away from chicken, we move away. Well, pork can has a different kind. There's another whole regenerative program for pork that can be done. We move towards these systems where pork is getting food waste and cattle is doing grass finished, grass start, grass finished, grass all. That's taking sunlight and grass and turning it into milk and protein and all of the rest, leather, out of two things. We cannot eat sunlight and we cannot eat grass. And there is no crop death associated with pastured animals. Like there just isn't. That's just not a thing. Like if you go into my pasture right now, we mob graze, high stock density. We move them every day. And you will see deer and their babies. You will see jackrabbits and foxes and snakes and all types of animals. Now, if I was growing, I don't know,
Corn.
grass on that where I live, everybody grows Bermuda grass. Yes, corn. But if I was just growing Bermuda grass and spraying a pre-emergence to make sure that no weeds competed with the most invasive of all invasives, but and you know, and then I'm spraying nitrogen onto the grass because there's no mycorrhizal relationships, there's no microbiology relationships at all in the soil, and so you're just dumping nitrogen. There's no life. Like I mean, I literally, from where I'm sitting right now, I can see a field where I have cattle mob grazing, and I can see the neighbor's Bermuda grass field. In full disclosure, the neighbor's Bermuda grass field is evenly one color of green, and looks like one, looks very green, like a lawn, like a golf course or something. And there's some variation in my pastures of colors of grass, but there's so much more life in what I'm doing. There's all different kinds of grass and all different kinds of animals. So that hay field that's going to get combined harvest every however many weeks, depending on the rain, is killing any, there's nothing living there, like nothing above ground, below ground, nothing is living. And right next door, my field is, and so even just cutting grass and feeding animals in a pen is not the same as having them in a pasture. And so to me, the amount of life that's being caused by these cows is a lot. And the amount of nature that's being preserved by doing it this way is so much more. And so this idea that the most crop death comes from feeding animals corn and soy. Well, no, I don't think we should be feeding animals corn and soy either. So I feel like we're partners on that. And so, anyways, the argument just goes on. But the reality is, I actually agree with them in many things, but they are just committed to not agreeing with me and also committed to not understanding. And then after I've made multiple points, they'll just say, but you're still going to slit its throat and kill it at the end. Yes, with intention and love. Yes, that is what is going to happen, but not just, I don't, and they'll say, well, that's intentional killing, which is worse than accidental killing. But in my mind, if you're combine harvesting a whole field, and don't get me wrong, I'm all for, I'm not saying Bill shouldn't combine harvest. I'm just saying, I don't think that it's somehow less bad when you're accidentally killing a bajillion things than when you're intentionally killing 10 cows that you take to the USDA slaughter.
And that's a great point. And I can't remember where I heard it, but it was on another podcast that most diets are already plant-based due to the rise of ultra-processed foods. And,
Yes.
one of the vegans' arguments, like you just mentioned, is, oh, you're going to kill that animal. And that's, on purpose. And that's worse than accidentally killing animals in pursuit of production of food. Nobody likes to talk about it, about how many skunks and deer and rabbits that they eat with their farm machinery every year.
A lot.
And
A
let's
lot.
just say maybe they're only actually killing 10% and they're destroying the habitat for the other 90%. So it's not just that we're like killing these small mammals, we're killing a lot of insects with pesticide, you know, including a lot of non-targeted species that are actually good for the environment or food for like a bird or food for another mammal. We're killing them. So it's not just that, you know,
the animals that are tough enough to colonize these farm fields, it's not just that we're killing them, it's also there's millions of acres of habitat that have been permanently destroyed. So one of the things up here in Kansas that, we're really fighting hard to preserve the habitat for is the lesser prairie chicken. That's a really cool bird. It's a North American grouse. It's about the size of a pheasant. It's not as pretty. Are they good to eat? Oh yeah, they're really good to eat. I'd rather not eat them. I'd rather watch them fly. Now, it's been a long fight. And I remember like going back to 2008, we met with a guy from the power company. Like he was the environmental director for the power utility. And they were going to build, they were planning to build these wind farms around here, and they were going to build a transmission line to get the power out. And they were looking where they could build all these wind farms. And they wanted to come down, put one on the ranch, and they had this plan. They were going to put like, I don't know, 73 towers up or something. And then that went away, and they said, okay, well, we're going to put this power line down here. Come talk to us about this power line. We talked about it, and we kept bringing up the lesser prairie chickens, because one of the things about the lesser prairie chicken is they do not like a horizon break. If they can see a horizon break within a quarter mile, they will leave. They won't go to that area. So they don't care about power poles, they don't care about radio towers, but they do care about oil wells, drilling rigs, and they definitely care about wind turbines. So if you have wind turbines, your prairie chickens are going to leave. If you have big power lines, your prairie chickens are going to leave. So what they wanted to do is they wanted to come down here to one of the last remaining pockets of native range, build this gigantic power line through it, and then put up a whole bunch of wind turbines on this ridge. And we basically said, no, that's not really going to happen. And here's where you should put the power line, and here's where you should put the turbines, and this is why. So they ran the power line down in the canyon that the river, they kind of ran it down in the bottom along the river, and they moved the wind farm to the next ridge north, up in farm country. And the farmers up there fought it. And I understand why. And, back in 2008, I had a little bit different stance on wind power. I know people with wind farms. I know a guy that's had a wind farm for 20 years, and what it's like dealing with, the people coming in to do maintenance and overhaul and, change blades and change hubs. I didn't want any part of that. And then there's the thousands of tons of concrete that are in the base, that even if they come out and they take the towers away after 20 or 25 years when the lease is up, those bases will still be in the ground forever. Their power cables, they're not going to take those out of the ground. They'll be in there forever. So I guess what I'm saying is, instead of putting that crap here, they moved it 20 miles north and put it already in a habitat that's permanently destroyed for prairie chickens.
And that makes sense. And my thing about you bring up wind farms and wind turbines, and I talk about this a lot, is that the reason we don't have a ton of support and studies and all this stuff about, I mean, there is studies about regenerative agriculture, but if you were to look up studies about plant-based meat, there's a lot more of them than regenerative agriculture. And it's because there's something to sell. With regenerative agriculture, there's no like quick way for anybody to get rich. There's no wind farms, there's no solar panel, there's no Teslas to sell, there's no electric everything to sell. And notice like that we've attached ourselves to the cow, and the cow farts. And I don't know if cows fart, I mostly see them burp, but this conversation ongoing. I just saw a study that says that and I don't know what scientists got this, but they said that cows on pasture, on grass, make more methane than cows eating corn and soy in a consolidated feedlot.
That makes no sense.
It doesn't make any sense. And so someone sent, I'm getting sent a lot of studies to show how wrong I am in my decisions of life right now. And so I was thinking, like, just think about, I don't even need to look at that study. Having a bunch of poop on top of poop on top of poop, putrefying is naturally going to make a ton of methane. Poop getting pulled down into the ground by dung beetles is naturally not going to be putrefying, not making any methane. So I even if you tried to convince me, and I personally have eaten foods that don't agree with me and been more gaseous than eating foods that agree with me. There's no way that a diet that's not meant for cows would make them create more methane than a diet that is meant for cows. Like I can't even comprehend how they jerry-rig that study to come out how they wanted it to, but it said that the study said that regenerative agriculture needs too much land and causes more methane, because cows on grass cause more methane than traditional agricultural methods.
I wonder if they were intellectually honest and they actually looked at it and said, okay, what's the emissions to grow the grass in the pasture versus how much energy and emissions does it take to grow the ration diet, to grow the feed, to grow the corn, to grow the alfalfa, to grow the soybeans, to feed them in a feedlot?
I don't know. And I mean, even if this was arguing that much of what's fed in feedlots is waste from other, and so, but that's only certain feedlots that are in proximity to whatever. But and that is true, and that's another argument for the vegans I try to explain. Like, so much of what you eat is subsidized by some consolidated feedlot system that's buying the waste product. So the olive oil you eat might be the waste, might be going to a feedlot. The
Distillers grains.
even all the burger, all the Impossible meats and all those, where's all the fiber going? I've heard, and I've never been able to conclusively prove this. So if someone says like out there, like that's not true, I've heard from multiple people that have firsthand, but I've never like seen it written like officially in a thing. But it makes sense. The Impossible, the Beyond, all of those are, where's all the fiber going? They're getting all this protein from plants. The fiber, so what I heard is that for every third of a pound of meat that they're getting, there's almost a full pound of fiber that's being fed to consolidated feedlot animals. And so that means the Impossible or Beyond or any of these meat burgers are being subsidized by the consolidated feedlot system. Or your beef is being subsidized by the Impossible Burger. I don't, whichever one. But anyways, this argument was that it's a lot of waste stream, so the emissions go to the other thing, the olive oil or the peach is, or the whatever the thing is, and then there's a waste stream. That is only true in California. That's very true. Like the amount of waste stream that we can feed to our cattle is, I mean, I could get dump truck full loads of lettuce, dump truck loads of pumpkins. Here where I live in Texas, the like the food producer to cattle producer ratio is such that it's almost, you pay top dollar for spent grain, whereas in California, if you pick it up, it's free from spent grain, from because the brewery to cattle rancher ratio in California is different than the brewery to cattle rancher ratio in Texas. So anyways, but no, they were not honest. Nobody in their right mind can say that a field, a beautiful pasture with all of the life that is in it, is the same as a consolidated feedlot, or worse than a consolidated feedlot. And if you think, like, you look at my cows grazing on this summer cover crop out there and then native grasses on this other field and whatever, and you look at them and you look at the butterflies and the foxes and the deer and everything that's in there as well, and you go, oh yeah, that's the problem. I should buy a Tesla and I should get solar panels and I should pay extra to get the wind power electricity to my house. Does anybody think that somehow that is better? Like my cows on grass is worse for the world than the battery in a Tesla? Like it's just, it's insane.
Or a solar farm that they're going to mow with a tractor.
So, or what about a solar farm that they're just going to destroy habitat of desert, and then it never, solar farms and wind farms have the problem of heating. And if we think that the planet is heating, and I think the planet is heating to some degree, but I don't think we can talk about it without talking about geoengineering. To only talk about climate change and not talk about the crimes against humanity of geoengineering, it blows my mind. But anyways, back to it. As a farmer in California, we have wind turbines that are run by propane, in the wintertime to keep frost from hitting the ground. Now, you have a windmill going nonstop. It argues that you're disrupting the air from settling and cooling to the coldest temperature. So there is miles of wind turbines that are, the air is never settling to the coldest temperature. So if you think that, oh, it doesn't make sense to me that a windmill that's moving the air to not settle would not, on an avocado orchard, would not do the same thing.
There was actually a study that came out within the last, it's been within the last month, I think, maybe like University of Minnesota. They've actually done studies and shown that wind farms keep it warmer in that area where there's wind farms. They create heat domes because of the mixing, because they're not mixing, the air is not mixing like it should. So it's
And it doesn't
hotter
settle, the
overnight.
air doesn't settle all the way down. And that's why we put it so it doesn't frost. And
now
so
imagine, just imagine, okay, we put up thousands of these wind turbines all across corn country and soybeans. Now, we had a situation a couple years ago where when the corn was trying to pollinate, the nighttime temperature stayed over 80 degrees and the corn didn't pollinate. The corn barely grew. So you see what I'm saying? Like we planted all these wind farms because, oh, we got to be green energy. We got to be green energy. You know, it's not going to affect the climate. Bullshit. You're not going to take 2% of the energy out of a system and it doesn't have a long-term effect. Yeah, I'm going to throw a flag on that one. So,
sure.
but the research was showing that the wind farms keep it hotter overnight.
Yes, because the cold air cannot settle. That's literally why we put up wind turbines. And so in grape country, in avocado country, in these places, citrus country, we only use those wind turbines a few nights a year when there's flowers on the trees and it's going to frost. That's like or you have young trees that are having, that are already leafed out. That is the only reason that you would use it's not like you're using it 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. That is the crazy about wind farms. And I tell people this all the time. Or in California, you can't believe desert habitat where it is just as far as the eye can see solar panels. And my question is, like, what's the end game? Like, this is going to just be like trash as far as the eye can see in 25 years. And how much power can this actually produce? And are we positive that the net gain is better than fossil fuels? Like, I'm just saying, if we taking a really, and I'm not anti-solar. I'm a prepper. I have solar. I have off-grid capability. Like, I believe that solar has a place as a supplemental, as an off-grid situation. My mom has a fully off-grid farm in Maui, but trying to power Los Angeles with solar is like, come on.
Yeah, and here's something a lot of people don't know. Los Angeles sits on top of one of the largest oil fields in North America.
Oh, I do know this. And do you know they just outlawed drilling in Los Angeles last year? And I made a post about this on Instagram. It did not make me very many friends, but so we've outlawed drilling in Los Angeles by, I don't know, whatever year they can step down. And people are celebrating this as if it is a win. Well, my question is, in a city that's so concerned about environmental issues, we are going to have the cleanest and highest, most regulated version of drilling that's going to be the least impact on the communities around. So by saying we're not going to drill in Los Angeles, we're not going to stop using gasoline in Los Angeles. So what's going to happen is that we are fully outsourcing the suffering somewhere else. And so what we are saying is, we in Los Angeles don't want to drill this huge reserve of oil that's underneath us, but it is okay for the Achuar people in Ecuador to have their entire rainforest taken down in their habitat that they've lived in, and they don't even have the skill set to live in the world because they still live in the old indigenous way, it's okay for their world to be destroyed, and we'll just buy gasoline from other countries. It's okay for us to outsource the suffering to many other countries that have far less regulations than we do, and feel good about ourselves that we're doing something for the environment. We're actually not. That's a net loss for the environment. By stopping drilling in Los Angeles, we're now importing oil. There's got to be an economic and environmental cost to importing oil in countries that have less commitment to humanity. And so therefore we are letting the abuse go somewhere else. And it's the same with an electric car. Oh, I drive an electric car, zero emissions. Like, zero emissions for what? Like, zero emissions at your house, but it's just over there at the coal plant. So this idea that we can outsource the suffering and then somehow be righteous is crazy. And it's the same with the vegan idea. We are outsourcing the suffering to the farmer who's chopping it up in his combine. We're outsourcing the suffering to whatever and saying, you who eat a cow, you're bad. I eat a pea protein patty, I'm good. But that's not true. The death is on both plates. And I'm not even saying people shouldn't eat a pea protein patty. I'm saying we cannot do it with righteousness in thinking that there's less suffering involved in the vegan diet. Having a diet full of less suffering means consciously committing to eating foods that cause less suffering. And that may be meat, and that may be dairy, and that may be plants. But you have to shake the hand that feeds you, eat food from regenerative farms, and be committed to being the solution. It's not as easy as a pen stroke as I'm only going to eat, and then that's easy. It takes a little bit more than that.
That's a lot.
Sorry.
No, I love it when you get on a rant. The diet with less suffering, and I've been thinking. Well, I'm always thinking about food because, like you guys, we have a big garden, grow a lot of our own food. It takes work. It takes a lot of work. It takes a lot of
So much work.
and it's a thankless job. A lot of times, it's backbreaking labor, and a lot of people don't want to do it. That's fine. But the people that don't want to do it need to at least respect the process and understand the process of what it takes to make that pea protein burger, right? Or to grow that cow, or to grow that delicious tomato that's on their plate. They need to understand what kind of work and what kind of labor it takes. And, outsourcing suffering. It's a theme. It's a theme across our society. As long as it's not in our backyard and we don't have to see it, and we're at least one step removed from the suffering, we can just turn the other way and ignore it and say, that's not my problem.
We do. You and I are on a computer that has batteries in it that some child mined the minerals that were necessary for that. And we look the other way. 100,000 children went missing at the border last year, and nobody seems to think about it that much. I just saw a thing that said that there's a reporting when you see a child rape or child something like that on a video, and it went from 4 million reports to 32 million reports over the last 10 years. So the amount of suffering that's happening everywhere, and we just we're like this, like, I can't handle it. And the powers that be are so happy to have us fighting over if regenerative agriculture or veganism is better for the environmental crisis, with quotation marks on both sides. And they're so happy to have us fighting about that, rather than coming together and say, no more poison, no more children disappearing, no more suffering. The tech industry does not get a fucking full-on pass for its environmental impact, while cows are being put to the the highest standards of like somehow cows are destroying everything, but all the technology that we're using all the time is not. It does not work. Tech needs to be held to the same standards that farmers are held to, because yes, tech is important, but so is food.
If they start talking about holding these AI companies responsible for their scope 3 emissions, they will all go out of business. Every single one of them, because there is no possible way with the amount of compute resources a company like OpenAI is using to train their latest model. There's no universe that exists where they could buy enough offsets.
Yeah, no. And the other thing is and I'm a Bitcoin maximalist. Don't take what I'm about to say as like a problem that I think Bitcoin is bad. I think Bitcoin is great. But there's small towns in Texas right now that are suffering. People, we are electric beings. And so if our frequency is being mixed with constantly, people are getting sick from the high-pitched humming of computer um
Mining rigs.
mining rigs. And this is also happening with AI, with where there's huge banks of computers and there's fans, and it's at like 86 decibels across the street from these mining rigs, across the street from these big computing banks that are, it's not just for Bitcoin, but it's for many different things, are using huge computers at this point. And human beings are getting sick from the frequency noise that's happening nonstop.
I could believe that. And, you know, it's funny you brought that up because I just saw, it was just last night, I was reading an article that came from Texas talking about like, it was a kind of a really sparsely populated rural area. I mean, I get sparsely populated in Texas can mean different things if you're by Arkansas or by New Mexico. Stupid fly. Um, but it was like somebody had come in and bought just, you know, like 2 acres of land and put up a Bitcoin mining farm. And it was just rows and rows of containers, like, you know, 20 or 40-foot containers. And you could tell it had refrigeration equipment in it, had huge power lines going into it. And I thought, you know, I, we can agree to disagree on Bitcoin. I get that it is, I get that when it's treated as property rather than currency, it can be a store of value. My argument is the intrinsic value of the product is zero. If we had an EMP tomorrow, there's no Bitcoin the day after.
I agree about the EMP tomorrow, but I think it's a way to take energy and turn it into value, which is essentially everything is taking energy and turning it into value.
That's always the exchange, is we're taking energy and turning it into value. And the fun part about energy is if you actually use scientific units instead of freedom units, uh, there's a SI unit called the BTU, British Thermal Unit, and you can convert all energy into BTUs. Okay, whether we're talking about gasoline energy, whether we're talking about, you know, me lifting a 50-pound sack of salt, you can quantify all of that with BTUs. And my dad is 25 years ago, my dad started saying this. He said, calories consumed versus calories produced. And the context of my operation, it's how much fuel do I use? How much food do I eat in order to produce pounds of beef? And am I making a net positive exchange, right? Am I consuming less BTUs in the production of my livestock than my livestock are generating? Generally, I think that answer is going to be yes.
Yeah.
So there's a huge disparity in that energy exchange ratio that we don't understand. And I think and a lot of it for me is rooted in food. People do not understand the amount of energy it takes to grow food. And we can substitute human energy for chemicals, tractors, or for oxes or horses, whatever you're using. But at the end of the day, it all comes down to how many BTUs did you consume to produce how many BTUs.
Yeah. And
So
certain things, it's going to be negative. Like, okay, we produce a persimmons vinegar. I don't know how many calories are in vinegar, but very few because the sugars have all been eaten up. And so we're essentially, we take persimmons that probably have a lot of calories, and then some microbiology eats that calories, and then we're selling a product with no energy necessarily in it because vinegar has very little to no calories.
Well, that's probably a good trade then.
How is it?
You're getting money for nothing.
Well, no, because the vinegar, because we had to grow the fruit to make
I
the
mean, I
vinegar.
mean, yeah. Anyway, we'll move on.
But anyways, my point is, yes, we think about this all the time about energy in, energy out. How does that translate?
Yeah,
And when you buy like for example, we sell pickled jalapenos, pickled cucumbers or whatever, and someone says $12. And I'm thinking to myself, $12, like I grew those jalapenos, I made that vinegar from scratch, and then I cut them up, I grew the garlic and the dill, and then I put it all in there, I canned it, I sealed it, and I got a sticker and put it on. I'm feeling like $12. I'm being gypped. And
yeah.
then the consumer feels like they're also being gypped. So
And and that's why I say the customers don't understand the labor economics of food,
no,
which well, I mean, which is the same as the energy economics of food, but they just don't understand the labor economics of food. And that's a symptom of a wider system being so far removed from agriculture, which is probably in effect, like going back to depression era policies, get big
yeah,
or get out. And that was doubled down, in the 80s. Get big or get out. And when we have corporations take over our food, corporations are not transparent. And if people are concerned about the environment, they're concerned about energy, they need to be concerned about transparency. And big corporations do not have it.
not at all. And we have no idea. I don't trust anything. I don't trust I don't trust chapstick. I don't trust makeup. I don't trust, I mean, like literally everything I'm terrified to put on my body, eat it. I think that everything is poison.
If you use chapstick, you'll always need to use chapstick. It's kind
Mhm.
of like if you pull a calf out of a heifer, you're probably going to have to pull a calf out of that cow as every time she has a calf. I don't use chapstick. I don't use Carmex. Like if my lips are chapped and bleeding, I'll put something on them. But I'm not a daily chapstick user and I never have been, so I don't need to be. Uh, it I'm thinking of that because I saw something on social media. I can't remember what platform it was on. It might have even been TikTok about they put stuff in chapstick to dry your lips out.
Yeah.
So you need to use more chapstick to moisten your lips.
Yes, like Carmex and a lot of those. Yeah, we make our own like salve with comfrey and CBD and stuff. But yes, that's but my point was I make because I don't want to put stuff on my kids, I make everything we make cold medicine with elder. I just harvested a bunch of elderberries and we harvested honey from our bees, and I'm gonna make cold medicine for the wintertime with spilanthes and so and my husband gets so frustrated, like, there's a dollar store down Dollar General and they have cough syrup, and I'm like, yeah, I'm definitely not feeding Dollar General cough syrup to my children.
The
And he's like,
worst of the worst from the
and,
worst
and
place.
he's like, so I have to plant elderberries, water elderberries, and then you're gonna harvest elderberries over a 4 or 5 month period because they don't all come ripe at the same time. You're gonna keep freezing them, and then I'm gonna harvest the honey from the beehives, and then you're gonna reduce down the elderberries so that the stems and seeds are not poisonous in water, and then we're gonna reduce that down with honey and put it into jars. So when our kids are sick, you can give them cough syrup in the middle of the night. I'm like, yes. And he goes, you do understand that if I married someone else, I would not have to do this. I said, yes, I do. But hopefully our children will be able to reproduce in the normal way.
I, I'm laughing and smiling because my wife does kind of the same thing. Like we have an elderberry bush out by the road that my dad planted in the late 70s. And this year it is going absolutely insane because I had 150 trees taken out of my yard. I had 3.5 acres. I had 150 trees taken out. So those elderberries are getting sunlight for the first time in years, and they are just. I'll try to remember to send you a picture
Send
later.
me a picture. Yeah,
All
I
the
love.
blooms. I mean, they're the size of these bloom clusters are the size of dinner plates almost. It's amazing. We're
That's
gonna have
how
so
ours
many.
are, but ours are already, because it's Texas, we're ahead of you. They're already ripening. But yeah, we had bloom clusters like that. Ours are small and wide because they're just a couple years old, but we put them around the greenhouse for late afternoon sun blocking because they can take the sun pretty intense, and then it'll blocks that late afternoon angled sun is so hard on the greenhouses, it just heats them up like crazy. I love elderberry syrup though. It's really good for you and has lots of properties. But that's me. I'm going to harvest juniper berries so we can make medicine for um heartburn. And my husband's like, okay. And he's always like, so money in, money out. Like, is this the best use of your time right now?
As long as you don't start planting more junipers so you can harvest their berries. There's plenty of those in the wild, I'm sure.
I don't think we're planting any junipers. I have several hundred acres. They call them cedars here, but yes. Um,
Yeah, and they're not really a real cedar. I mean, they're fake cedar. But yeah, we have those here. We call them. I mean, the specific ones we have here are Eastern red cedar, which you're down around Bandera, San Antonio area.
we
Like
have juniper ash. I think they're called juniper.
like
Juniper.
there's some with red berries on them.
We only have blueberry
Okay,
ones.
ours have blue on them, so it might even be the same tree. But you cut them off, they're gone.
If you cut them off, they're gone.
You get underneath all the
1,000
green,
more will
you can
come
usually
up.
kill it.
Yeah, but if you the rest, but then more will come up. Um, but yeah, we're in the middle of trying to just keep the old ones and kind of thin out so we can do more silvopastures on. So we have like couple hundred acres of juniper forest that is not letting water get down all the way on the small raining, only on big rains does the ground get wet. And so talked to the guys from Bamberger Ranch. One of them came out and we're trying to thin it out the way they did to bring back the springs and stuff.
Uh,
Um, Go
so
ahead.
just a quick note about cedar trees.
Yes.
I'm not entirely sure if we're dealing with the same plant, but I bet even if we're not, your junipers are going to be similar enough to mine that a lot of this information is going to be valuable. So up here, we figured that between 1 in 7 and 1 in 10 cedar trees is female. The rest are going to be males and only carry pollen. And the females, uh, the seeds aren't very viable if they just fall on the ground. But if a bird eats it, they're about 95% more likely to germinate. The good news is the birds that eat those berries around here, they're only going to make it about 2 to 250 yards before that berry's out of the digestive tract. So what I'm saying is going after the female trees and getting rid of all of those first, that solves your problem for later generations.
Yeah. That is a good idea. So Bamberger's thing is take out every single thing that you can't put your hands around. And that their thing is that because when it's a closed canopy of cedars, it's inhibiting water from actually getting to the ground because the way that their little
Less than 10% of the rain that falls on an eastern red cedar will make it to the ground.
yes. And so by opening up the canopy and then lollipopping the trees so they're more of a traditional style tree, so they're not like taking up so much space
They're not a bush on the ground.
and they're not a bush on the ground. So this hat is they were able to have you watched the Bamberger documentary? It's really interesting about this guy, he was like a fast food chicken billionaire, millionaire, and he bought this ranch in central Texas and no live water, no springs, no nothing. And he started, everybody said, oh, they're invasive. You just got to get rid of all the junipers. And he sought some other advice and basically realized that they have a purpose. They're pioneer species coming into this highly alkaline soil, their droppings are making the soil less alkaline. They have a reason. And so he decided to just open up the canopy everywhere. And basically by doing that, he was able to bring back all the creeks and all the
So
bubbling, all the aquifers underneath got refilled up. And so, and then his springs were running again. And so, and they've had a lot of success with that, and they have an education center. So their guy that was their educator for many years came here, walked our property, and gave us some advice about that.
I took an excavator up a bunch of my canyons, and I had a mulcher head on it, and I ground up every cedar tree that I could get a hold of that I could reach. I ground them into dust, and you would not believe the water that I've got and where I've got it. I is it's one of those things I really have to show people, right? And I don't show everybody that comes on the ranch, and I don't always talk about it, but I have a water aquifer at 1,930 feet on the ranch. And I go from about 70 feet above that to about 100 feet below that, between the south end and the north end. So there's all kinds of spots everywhere on the ranch at 1,930 feet. And where 1,930 feet comes across the canyon, there's moisture there. There's a wet spot. Sometimes there's a spring. Sometimes there's a pool of water. Sometimes it's just a change in the grass that I'm noticing because there's more soil moisture there. But at 1,930 feet, my willow trees. When you go drive around canyons, and everywhere there's a willow tree in the top of a canyon, I can tell you that's 1,930 feet plus or minus 10. Every time.
Wow.
There's even a place where I've got a trail going down a hill that goes right across there. So what's going on is there's a layer of bedrock, and it's not quite like a fully capped layer of bedrock. I mean, water can get through it in some places, other places it just kind of runs along there. So that's what's holding the water up at 1,930 feet, is basically kind of a rock layer. And that's where all my creeks start. I've got, out of my 14 ponds, 9 of them, the water level in them is 1,930 feet plus or minus 5.
Wow. Yeah, we don't have as much land as you, but we do have a dry creek that has not been dry in, I mean, according to the neighbors and the people we bought it from, it's gone dry in the last 30 years 3 times. And so it's generally not dry. And right now it's been dry since May of 22 and has not come back. And even the part where the spring comes out and it stayed wet in that little spot for the longest, it's not even wet there anymore. So we need some significant rain. But yeah, we're doing a more targeted approach than what you're talking about, but basically keeping the hardwood, and then the large older cedars, because we have some cedars that are, probably 400 years old, big trees, and then just trying to get all the bushes off the ground.
I ground up some cedar trees that were easily 4 foot across on the stump at the ground level. Just turn them into dust. I didn't do that with a lot of, like, the ones by the time they got that big, I got a little smarter and was like, okay, we're just kind of cut the top off, scratch all the limbs off, and then we'll go down to the bottom and cut it, and then take this log and we'll throw it up there on the hill and move on and not spend the 10 minutes it's going to take and the diesel fuel to grind that tree up. I got tired of it. And, Molly, there were places where I would have kind of a foot to 18 inches deep of mulch because there is that many trees in such a small area.
Yeah, and in California, we used to get all the free mulch. So I mean, that is such good soil building material. And the people here in Texas, it's interesting. I'm not in a big agricultural area except for hay and cattle, right? That's the main things that everyone is growing. There's a sheep farm nearby, some goat farms, but
You're not in the Central Valley. You're not in Southern California anymore. That's all anybody grows is cows, corn, and soybeans.
and so And oh, I went to the Texas, like the ag extension. I was like, hi, this is what I do in California, and I'm I want to do something similar here. And could you tell me what easily grows and what I'm not going to be suffering and fighting against? And they were like this.
We could tell you how to grow Bermuda grass in your pasture for your
Yep.
cow.
Yeah, exactly. And that was it. Like they were like, you could do a hay operation. And I was like, uh-huh. They came out, they were nice. They came out to the property. And then I was like, so there's some grants for high tunnels. And they were like, we have to check about that. I'm like, no, for sure there is.
No,
Um,
it's this program number, it's this program number.
and they're like, we'll check about that. And then I just saw on the Texas agriculture website that there's like a $4 million allocated to bring figs back. I have a fair amount of figs that we planted, and we have good data. Like, well, these are working, these are not. Figs are easy to propagate, so we've been propagating the ones that are working. And I was like, oh, let me get in on this grant situation. I called like a couple of people, like, hey, who's handling this? And like, but anyways, nobody knows about growing anything outside of the normal things. And everybody told me you're not going to be able to grow anything. And so I said, okay, thank you so much. And I can't imagine like someone spending all this money and putting up greenhouses and moving their whole life that you just walk in and like shit on them. But people think like, because I'm from California, I'm dumb or something, or don't know how to farm. I'm not sure which one it is, but maybe both. But so this one neighbor that had told me how hard everything was going to be, we've started opening the restaurants on Saturday night on the farm. So from 3 to 9, you can come and get a farm to table meal. Everything's from the farm, and we have the farm stand open, produce available and stuff. And he was like, tell the truth. It's way harder than you thought it was going to be. I was like, farming's hard. It's all. And then he's like, tell the truth. It's like impossible. And I'm like, I'm standing next to a table with eggplants and tomatoes and all the summer watermelons and cucumbers, and there's jars of pickles and jars of pickled jalapenos. And I'm going, I'm sorry, yes, it's in our first year on a new ranch. Of course, there's going to be, but is it like impossible? No, of course it's not impossible. Like that is not a logical thing to think that it's impossible. But that's what everybody here believed, is it's impossible to grow anything here. And the two things are the heat and the alkalinity of the soil. So if you come in and you're saying like, okay, I'm operating for the heat and the alkalinity of the soil, and I know to deal with alkalinity, we have to bring up the mycorrhizal relationship. So we're going to plant a bunch of summer grasses around all of the gardens, and those will operate as windbreaks and air conditioning for the gardens. And so I have like sorghum, Sudan, ancient corn, popcorn around all the beds, like kind of, air conditioning and shade for everything. And I don't know. To me, it's like you come in and you find out what the problems are, and then you operate to mitigate those problems. But it's this area of the world, people have just given up on any kind of farming besides, well, maybe not just this area, lots of areas of the world. People have given up on anything except for, but a hundred
They,
years, a
they,
hundred years ago, you couldn't get every produce in the grocery store. People were essentially growing produce. Even my neighbor said, oh my gosh, where you planted all those pear trees and that orchard, that was my grandfather's garden for years. He'd do corn on the top part, and the bottom part he'd do veggies, and then he'd switch it. And I was like, uh-huh. And they're like, how did you know? And I was like, well, it was the only place that it seemed like the soil had been cared for at all on the ranch, so we started there. But and they were like, yeah, I mean, before we had an HEB and a Lowe's and da 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 da, my grandfather grew everything. And I was like, yeah, that seems like my grandparents grew, everybody's grandparents grew vegetables of my generation, I feel like, but we've gotten to a world where we don't really grow vegetables anymore.
we don't grow anything anymore. I mean, people just it
And so,
it's just so easy to go to Dollar General and buy a box frozen meal, or pick up the phone and call, or you pick up
Uber
the phone
Eats,
and order food anymore.
just
You look
tap
at
some
your screen, you
buttons on your.
tap a couple times, and Wendy's shows up at your door, or McDonald's or Taco Bell.
But the question is, what resilience are we trading for that convenience? And that's the question that I want to ask all the time. People say, well, this. I say, I know, but what resilience, what human resilience have we traded for that meal?
All
Because
of it.
I've only been here farming in Texas Hill Country full time for only 7 months and part time, flying back and forth for a couple of years. The amount I know about what is working and what is not working is more than the ag extension agent in this area. I'm telling, like, what is working is a lot of things. What's not working is also a lot of things. But I started all this because we were talking about the cedar mulch. People said do not put the cedar mulch in your compost. You'll never grow anything. Cedar kills everything.
Yeah, the oils in the cedar
In
will
the
poison
cedar,
it.
it will poison it and you'll never grow anything. And I'm like, literally like, if that was true, cedar mulch would be like the pathway of choice in everywhere, and it would never, and nobody's gardens would ever have any weeds in the pathways. I say, well, what would you use to acidify? The soil is literally white where it's in some areas of the ranch. And I mean, we're on limestone. So I'm like, what is it you would use to acidify the soil? If I'm just saying from an observer, I go and I look on the hillsides and I look underneath a cedar tree, I can see this beautiful black soil. So my interpretation of what's happening is the cedar is bringing the pH of the soil to something that microbiology can live in better. And then the relationship there is creating black soil versus the white soil over here. Everybody argued with me. And you know what? We put tons of cedar mulch into our compost and didn't kill anything.
Yeah, I can buy that totally. The places, where I was saying there were places where I had a foot, 18 inches deep of mulch. A lot of it was when I'd get into green trees that didn't get burned up by the fire, when I was getting back into the green ones. And, you know, while I was working there, I thought, okay, what's the worst thing? What's the worst that's going to happen here? I'll come back in 2 years and there'll still be mulch here on the ground, not bare soil, just mulch. Like, okay, I can deal with that. But what helped me, or what really helped my soil, is when I figured out, hey, dummy, instead of just leaving the mulch on top of the ground, mix a little soil in with it. Use the teeth on that tool, stir it around a little bit, get some soil mixed up in there. Mollie, the places that I mixed good soil in with that mulch, I came back later that summer and there was 6 foot tall big blue stem growing there. Just
Oh, and I bet
blew my
that
mind.
20%, it's probably like 20% organic matter in the soil there.
Yeah, it's ridiculous.
Yeah, we used to get free mulch in California. I dream of the free mulch and days in California. They don't want to pay to dump it. And so I became the spot, and I would just get piles of trees that were on the side of the road, that were wherever, that were getting shredded up. And I would take it, endless mulch just came and got dropped off at my house. And now, like, I chase down every truck with a chipper on the back, and I like give them this little card, and I'm like, dump here. And but it's crazy that it's such a good tool for building soil. I love mulch, and I also love cedar mulch, even though they say you can't put cedar mulch on the ground. But it's the what's possible with regenerative agriculture is so beautiful, because there's so many different ways that we can interact with nature, take our role as the keystone species, and work with her to make everything that's happening better. And that is the beauty of regenerative agriculture.
I can get behind that. I could definitely get behind that. So 7 months in Texas. Are you a
7 months.
Texan? Are you a Texan yet, or are you still a Californian?
Well, if you ask the people in California, they would say I was a Texan. If you ask the people in Texas, they will say I'm a Californian.
Where's your heart?
I'm here at my ranch. We rarely leave. I mean, you probably know this. Like, there's so much work that I rarely leave the ranch unless I'm going back to California to work. I I work, we work all day, every day here on the ranch, and we don't eat that much food from the grocery store. And so I don't run to the store that much. And, we run to hardware store, Home Depot, or, uh, the feed store maybe, but mostly we don't leave the ranch that much. But I love Texas. I even love this Texas summer. People hate it, but the hot nights. It's probably bad for cord, but I do love the hot nights.
Okay.
Um, it's cold always at nighttime in California. It's desert, so it can be 100 degrees in the daytime, and then it's going to be 65 at nighttime.
That's one of the things that bothers me the most about living here is if it's cool in the morning, if I can get out in the cool of the morning, I almost don't care how hot it get is going to get that day. Like,
Hot there.
give me 65 in the morning. I don't care if it's 110 at 5 o'clock. I'll be fine.
You
But
would like California then.
no, I wouldn't. There's too many people. Like, California is a wonderful place. Don't get me wrong. It's incredibly beautiful. The landscape is amazing. The weather is terrific.
Oh,
The only problem with it, the only problem with California is Californians have ruined it.
that's true. I never thought I would leave California. It's a heartbreak. It's a little heartbreaking, to be honest. I took my soil at my ranch in California from 0.01% organic matter when it was left fallow. Orange orchard was taken out and left fallow and just sprayed for however many years, left fallow, and weeds dealt with once or twice a year with spray. I took it from that to 20, greater than 20, so not 21, but greater than 20% organic matter in a matter of 5 years. Like, what the soil was so incredible. What was being produced was so incredible. How much produce we were producing on such a small area was amazing. And so to give that up after building that beautiful soil and then have to give it up. And I went and visited the farm, and I'm happy that the people are doing the right thing by continuing the program I was doing. But it's also a little sad to just watch, like, oh, apparently that tree I planted was not worth it and they just hacked it out. Like, oh, the avocados have weeds all the way to taller than me. Guess we don't have a riding lawnmower over here. Um, but they're doing like an education thing, so I mean, I don't know. People were weeding with a sigh and flip-flops, and I was like,
Okay.
okay. I had a rule. We don't work in flip-flops on
Well,
you can wear flip-flops to dinner, you can wear flip-flops to the pond, but we have a no flip. You have to wear boots to work on my farm, and you have to wear long pants. Um, and that's just a safety thing. We don't let people wear flip-flops and dresses, and we also don't weed with a scythe. We weed with a weed whacker or a machine like a tractor or a
maybe they're just that committed to being environmentally responsible. They wanted to do their weeding with a scythe.
I mean, my neighbor goes, they're really nice people, but I don't know what kind of farmers they are. But I mean, I actually have a dope farmer there. He does centropic farming, and he's from Brazil, I want to say, but he's doing some awesome gardens that look unbelievable. But the rest of the ranch is kind of just getting overgrown. But it's sad. It's heartbreaking to put your art and life and soul and 80 hours a week into something and have to give it up because the economics of California no longer work for you.
I, I'm thinking about what you just said in the context of succession planning. So,
Yeah.
that's something that I think about a lot. The average age of farmers and ranchers in the U.S. is like 66 years old. there's 3 to 4 times the number of people over that age than there is under it. And is that maybe one of the reasons why it's so hard to let go, is because, you know, you put a lot of your heart and soul into that ranch in California. And when you go back and when you see it under someone else's management and they're not doing things exactly like you would, it's difficult to see. And I think that that's the same. I think that's why, you know, there's a lot of control being exerted from the nursing home over farming and ranching today. You know, guys that have been doing it 30, 40 years, afraid to make a change or afraid to let another operator take it over or pass it on to their son or their grandson because they don't want to see the changes that the other person would make. You know,
And I think that
why did they
that's,
take that tree out? They might have had an excellent reason and a line of logic to remove that tree.
oh, for sure. They may have, and they probably do. And honestly, I'm grateful that there's, I mean, it would, if someone had just come in and, because our orchard is like highly diverse, and I mean, it's like 250 different kinds of trees. And imagine if someone had just come in and planted lemons, just tore it all out with one of those grinders that you talked about and put in lemons, I would have, oh. So I'm grateful that somebody is, but then they were planting passion fruit between the rows of the lemons and oranges and avocados, and I was like, oh my God, passion fruit are crazy viney trees, and it's going to be, I would think that's going to be a lot of labor, a lot of maintenance, and there's no like machine for that. But my husband was like, shut up. I'm like, why? And he's like, it's not your farm anymore. If they want to grow passion fruit 4 feet from an avocado tree, like that is their prerogative.
They'll just have to learn that lesson on their own.
Yes. I was like, well, should we just show them the carob tree that is next to a passion fruit tree and see that it looks like a carob passion fruit tree because it's so entangled in passion fruit? And he was like, no. I was like, okay. But anyway, I'm grateful to be here in Texas. I'm grateful for the state and how it regulations are. I'm learning to navigate the weather. We are learning, we had not good luck. Like we've always grown tons of corn, popcorn, and a native corn from Oaxaca, where my husband's from. Not haven't been able to grow corn here, and maybe it's because it's too hot at nighttime, but I don't know. It's not a nitrogen issue. It's not, I don't know what it is. It's not working. But so we're learning and we're trying things and doing things different, and we're growing different stuff, but other stuff is going like crazy. And I mean, watermelons, pumpkins, like there's certain things that are just going, and all the tea stuff, like the hibiscus flowers and lemongrass, and we're doing a bunch of tea. We're doing yopon and mint and lemon verbena and echinacea and spilanthes. We're gonna do a whole line of dry teas because the tea stuff is just going crazy.
That's
And
like a lot of dollars per pound.
yeah, a lot of dollars for a pound, and it's dry. So for something you're selling online, I think it's a lightweight thing, so you don't have to pay tons in shipping. Um, and obviously we're moving to more of a meat program than in California. We were majority vegetables. We have an awesome rotational pig program. We're basically moving the pigs every month, and we're putting them in an area with cedars. We're taking out all the baby cedars like you were talking about. We're leaving a few big cedars, and then we're putting them in there, feeding them for a month, and then we're moving them to the next spot, and then we're planting, and so we're creating all these more silvo pastures with the pigs. And maybe we don't keep pigs forever, but right now they're a really awesome tool for turning some of these areas that are not silvo pastures into silver pastures. And so we have a bunch of pigs, and then we have goats and sheep And those are grazing in the higher areas. There's all these like little paddocks that are throughout the cedars. And so we're moving them every single day. And then the dairy cows, just because of the proximity to milking, are on the main fields down below, high stock density, moving every single day. And so we spend a lot of time just moving animals. The truth is, that's
It's that's what I was doing all morning. Like I was out all morning moving cows, checking mineral. I got the first bunch move. I got the scheduled move done. Okay,
yeah,
that went fine. So then we went to go check the other bunch. And sometime since I left yesterday, about right around this time yesterday, I had a gate fail. So I had about half my cows in the wrong paddock. So okay, for reference, it's about 160 pair in this herd, 8 bulls. Okay, they're supposed to be on 132 acres. Like we were going to be there for like 5 days. Put them in there 3 days ago. There's a 92-acre pasture just south of that. About half of them were in there and been in there for half a day. So it's not like it was a huge deal, but it's like, okay, got to deal with this. Just shove them, go get them gathered up, shove them back through and fix the fence and go on with life. And it's one of those questions because the neighbor, now I'm not accusing the neighbor of doing anything at all. Okay. So let's just be clear about that, people. I have a neighbor who the last few days has been going through that gate, has had to travel through that pasture to go check his stuff. It's fine. He can use, we let him use that road because there's not really any other access to that part of their ranch. We just ask, put the gates up, and if you run through one, let me know. Now, I'm not real sure if somebody hit that gate or if the cows balled up against it and
to
broke
get,
the wire. Now, if the cows generally break the wire is going to be in the pasture that they went to, right?
yes,
But if somebody drove through the gate, it might be the other way.
yes.
So the fence was laying into the pasture that the cows were supposed to be in, and they were on the other side. So, like I said, I'm not accusing anybody. Stuff happens. Stuff happens. But yeah, if the wire would have been laid out the direction the cows would have been going, I would never think anything of it. But being laid out the direction they came from, I have questions, but I'll never.
Yeah. Um, that's funny. Like we have 3 cows right now missing, and not missing. I know where they went, but that neighbor is in not a dispute, but they're like inheritance, and it's getting split up between cousins, and it's a big ranch, and it's getting split up between cousins, and so they're not letting anybody on the ranch right now. And so he said, "Well, but if I see these 3 Brahmas, I'll pen them up and I'll let you know, and you can come get them." Then we're going through life. I'm assuming they're over there somewhere. And then all of a sudden he calls, but the truck is in the shop with the fifth wheel. And I don't have, and the stock trailer that I have, it's a bumper pull. These Brahmas are not going to go in it's like a fiberglass one for like 2 horses. And it's not, I would not put these Brahmas that broke through the 4 wires of, it wasn't electric, but just barbed wire. I'm not going
Well,
to put these
because it's a
Brahmas,
Brahma, they probably just jumped over it.
probably, but I'm not going to put them in this thing. So we have no way to go pick them up. And I said, well, can you just keep them in your pen and we'll come feed them? And he's like, no, because my cousins and everything. And I'm like, okay. So then we finally got our truck back, but now it's been a week and he hasn't seen our cows. So I don't know what is going on, but I'm not allowed to go over there to get them. And then I made a lease agreement with my other neighbor for their pasture. And then the same place that my cows got into his thing, the fence is, but it's not on my fence line. So it's not like for me to fix it. It's on his fence line with the neighbor. All his cows came in and ate, and it's not that big, but it's like 50 acres. And they ate all the grass in this pasture. And so then I'm like, need to talk to that neighbor and say like, hey, so this lease agreement, we need to fix the fence first, and then I'll start paying you. But right now it's just like the other. So
I'll be happy to fix my half. but you got to take care of your half.
Well, because it's on his fence line with the other neighbor, and so there's not, but we had just leased that pasture, but then the other guy's cows ate it all before we moved our cows over there. So, yeah, there's always interesting at least here, there's always somebody's cows are getting onto somebody's bull is somewhere. That's a common occurrence because it's literally there's like 6 ranches all connected and all cow people.
I,
But usually when it's no problem to go on the other guys and his cows have been on our property many times, it's never been a problem. It's just right now with this dispute happening, we are not going on there.
I'm sure that's going to be a fun one, and we'll just leave that mess alone because like
Yeah.
I that it sounds like it's an undivided interest thing with a bunch of different heirs.
It is.
Yeah. Yep. I've seen that work out around me. I've seen how that plays out over the last 20 years. And that's not something I would ever put into any of my estate planning because that it, it's like saying, I can't make up my mind on how to divide this fairly and equitably. So I'm going to let you guys fight it out after I'm dead.
My grandmother used to always say, "There's no will. You guys can just fight about it." And that was not true, but she would say it all the time. I don't know why. It was not true. There was fully a will when she passed, and it was very well thought out. But she used to always say that.
Sounds like she was a spoon,
What's a spoon?
the one that stirs it all up.
Oh yeah, for sure, for sure. Um, but I'm super happy to be here in Texas. I wish things were going better in California. I wish that people were excited about this change that we did with the restaurants and shifting them to regenerative protein. I wish that the vegan voice was not the louder voice, and I wish that the regenerative voice was the louder voice. Um,
I,
and
I, you said the answer earlier.
yes, what did I
There's no
say?
money that like, there's no product for regenerative agriculture. For vegans, there's fake meat. There's all these vegan products that they can put a label on and make claims.
Yes, and that's why there's so many studies showing that it's the best environmental diet in the world. But I'm not sure that if regenerative agriculture had some big financial end game, not just like healthier ecosystems, less chemicals, cleaner waterways, and healthier food, but like some financial end game, we'd have so many studies and so many investigations and so many documentaries. But think about compared to like how many vegan documentaries there are, and then regenerative agriculture, we can count maybe 6, 7
I mean, well,
documentaries.
Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, Roots So Deep. I mean, there's some.
Well, Kiss the Ground, Common Ground, yeah, we was my brother's nonprofit, and 10 years of raising money to get those to happen, it's wasn't like there wasn't, and they spent, I mean, I'll just say they spent 10 times the money on the first Kiss the Ground film than what Netflix gave them for it. So it was a 80% loss on a lot of money to put that out. So that was a nonprofit was able to do that, but there was no profit in it.
But it was important. It was
No,
important
it's
because it
good
started a
work.
lot of conversation.
Yeah.
And it educated a lot of people. And that's difficult to put a price on. And it ties in. Like there's not a killer app. Regenerative ag does not have a killer app. You know what I'm saying? You know what I'm saying, right?
Yeah.
It doesn't have something that's really sexy and really flashy that's going to get a lot of attention and get everybody interested. We don't have it. We don't have, you can't go to the farm store and buy a box of soil health. You can't go buy a box of regenerative agriculture. It's a change in mindset, change in practices, change at looking at the world. And it's also having to acknowledge that maybe everything that I was taught in college about agronomy
Is not true.
is not true. And just like your experience with extension in Texas,
Yeah.
they can tell you how to grow really great Bermuda hay. They can tell
Yeah.
you what to put on it. They can tell you how to feed your cows, what vaccines, what implants, what supplements, everything to give them so they're set up perfectly to go into the feedlot system.
Yeah.
But grow fig trees, or say you want to grow oranges, they won't have anything for you.
Yeah. I mean, we're having great success with pears. We planted 17 varieties of pears. Many of them are doing very, very well. And so I think that there's a good possibility for a pear market here. Um, there's a lot of things that are possible. It's just people, I'm out here doing the study myself.
There's not it, so the thing is, regenerative agriculture requires a lot of people to be on the ground, a lot of intelligent, creative people that care about the land to be on the ground and produce food, because it does require more labor to produce food under a regenerative system than it does under a conventional system. I think we can agree on that.
Yes, we can.
And it's not always labor. I mean, like I said earlier, we make these trade-offs in our food production. Instead of investing a lot of labor and love and creativity in a human effort into growing food, we substitute chemicals, we substitute machinery, right? Because
Yes.
it's easier. That allows us, oh, well, that makes us more efficient with our time. There's no use being efficient if you're not being effective. And there's no sense in hitting bullseyes if you're aiming at the wrong target. And if your target is, you know, my yield per acre, okay, yield per acre balanced against what? The energy cost, the pesticide use, the soil erosion, the wind erosion.
It's it's so interesting. I have a neighbor and he leases a ton of pasture land around that's like hilly, that wouldn't be a hay field, right? Hilly, what was. And he doesn't have that many cattle, but he leases a lot of land and he moves them. And then he has his hay field and he pulls bales of hay off of his hay field. Now, I've done the math on if he did wire on and moved and did high stock density just on his hay fields and then the pastures that he has around. I believe he can have a higher stock density than he has right now on like 8,000 leased acres because of how he's doing it. And I think that he could have a higher stock density, have more money in cattle at the end of the year, and not have to do the whole hay thing at all.
You're probably right.
And he might still even get 2 cuts of hay and not have to pay for fertilizer.
Or be able to get a good graze, then come hay it after grazing. Like, I've heard of people doing that too.
He had this beautiful, it was like clover and all this stuff, that native stuff that came up in one of his fields this spring. And it was like winter season stuff. And all his fields looked totally dead because Bermuda grass, it goes dormant. And this one field, and I said, can I drive out there just to see what's growing? I just want to see what's doing well in the winter. Because I mean, my fields looked fairly dormant at that time, except for we had some cereal rye in the ground for grazing, that I got for free from the mill. It got bugs in it, and so I was like, I'm gonna plant it on one of my fields. But anyways, I go out there and it's all this native stuff that's crept up through the Bermuda grass, is dormant. And I was like, this is beautiful. And then he was like, yeah, I'm not in the business of growing any of that. And like 2 days later, he was out there spraying Roundup and pre-emergence and made it brown like the rest of his fields. And I thought, no desire for like in thinking like, well, this stuff is growing. Is this good fodder for cows? What is this? Can I grow this in the wintertime? It's clearly growing right through my Bermuda grass in the wintertime. Is there some way that I can use this to feed my cows in the wintertime while my fields are dormant?
Nope, that
No.
weed, that's a weed, and it's stealing moisture from next year's grass. We got to go kill those weeds because they're stealing moisture from next year's grass.
It's not even how moisture works, but anyways, yes.
I know that.
No, I know. I'm just like it's like the vegans arguing with me like oh, this is the other thing. Grass fed uses more water. And it's not, I don't even know what the argument is, but let's say hypothetically pasture somehow uses more water than your corn and soy and everything other kinds of silage.
Yeah, that's hilarious.
Let's just say the hypothetical. Then I'm like, okay, so where do you think the water is going? Where is the water going? So when I feed my cows water, and we do have K lines in some areas that like don't have, they have more runoff, like are a little steeper, and so sometimes it doesn't catch as much water as the truly bottom hay fields of our property. I don't know if that makes sense what I'm saying, but we use some K lines if it's very, very hot in some areas, but mostly we don't irrigate our pastures. They're not irrigated or whatever. My neighbor, on the other hand, has a pivot and they're growing their Bermuda grass with a pivot, right? And so someone explain it to me. Someone tell me how we're using more water. But then I said, so let's say the water I'm watering, where do you think the water's going? And a cow drinks water and pees it out. Where's the water going? What do you mean that a grass-fed cow is using more water? I just, more water than what? It doesn't make any sense.
Okay.
And where is the water going?
Okay. So that's one of those things that I would like to see the study, and I would go to their data. I would go to their actual research methodology, and I would see where were these animals? What pasture were they in? Or what grass-fed diet were you feeding them in a feedlot so you could measure it? So
Yeah,
let's just
because
say
that's the other thing. People will say grass-fed, grass-finished, and they feeding
corn
Bermuda.
silage and alfalfa, two of
Yes,
the most water-hungry crops. It
in the world.
40 to 50 inches of water to grow an alfalfa crop. It takes more than that to grow a corn crop.
We just we throw it around the barns that don't have uh like not the barns, but we have like areas that are like with a pitch roof and a ton of water ends up because of the rain in certain areas. We throw alfalfa seeds there. That's the only place we grow it.
Well, so they can, I mean, technically, a cow standing in a feedlot eating corn silage and alfalfa is a grass. They can call that a grass-fed cow. Okay.
Grass-fed, that's finished, yeah.
They can call that grass-fed, grass-finished. And if you want to make grass-fed cows look environmentally bad, you tally up those production numbers from all that corn silage and all that alfalfa, and then say, well, compared to a conventionally fed cow, this is this much worse. They can
And I
make
was
things lie. I mean, without being very specific and digging into some of the nuance, like grass-fed cow. Okay, what kind of grass-fed? Are we talking about a grass-fed cow that stood in the feedlot and ate a quote grass ration? Or are we talking about a cow that is out eating planted forages? Or are we talking about a cow that's on native range? Because they're all three grass-fed.
different things and they're all, and there's even like I'm a combination, right? We plant cover crops and there's native pasture. So it's like some are combination of those things. And so they're
That's
all going to be
fine.
different, but they're all going to be different amounts of input output.
And that's fine. Just be honest about what your quote grass is. That's all I'm saying.
I agree.
All right.
Oh, there we agree. But yeah, I think about efficiency and effort, and sometimes we're not as efficient as we could be because there's some effort that we have to put out that we're not used to putting out to try this new thing. And so all that I can do or you can do is be the example so those around us say like, oh my God, how am I have 8,000 acres that I'm leasing and she's got the same 40 cow calf pairs on significantly less? How's that working? And then that's all that we can do.
It takes a long time for the neighbors to notice that you've got twice as many cattle on the same amount of land. Like, trust me, it really does.
Really?
Yeah. Yeah, it really does. Um,
I mean, but my neighbors here are not interested. Even I was trying to talk to them about direct to consumer. You know, people are struggling, but then they're just doing a cow calf, taking it to the auction, and that's it. That's all that they're doing. And they're not even, they're moving the cows like 3 times a year onto big, huge area. Like it's
welcome to
huge
the Great
past.
Plains, Mollie.
What?
Welcome to the Great Plains.
Huge pastures for huge, long lengths of time, and not that many cows. And then struggling to just pay the taxes on property that they inherited. And I'm saying, let's do this other thing. There was a grant for on-farm processing. I tried to put some people together because you need a certain amount of farmers in your area that are all. I couldn't even get people to write a letter that said that if we got the grant, they would be interested in participating in processing.
No, you would have had to write the letter for them, given them a copy with a stamped envelope, and all they had to do is sign it, fold it, and put it in the envelope. Half the people still wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, so I don't know. I'm interested in how, if we want to have, people talk a lot about energy independence in the United States, that we have to be energy independent, we have to be able to have manufacturing. I mean, foundationally, we need food independence.
Yes.
And if you are growing cow calf pairs and then taking the calves to auction in November, and something, let's use your EMP thing, hits tomorrow, you are in no way prepared to, if there's a, let's say, a 2 month period where it takes 2 months to get the world back online after EMP.
Okay.
Give that, the person having a cow calf pair with no processing, no milk, no vegetables, no grain stores, are not prepared to feed themselves or their neighborhood for that 2 months where no food is coming into the grocery stores.
Yep.
I, on the other hand, am over here like with a bone saw and a meat grinder, and like a bandsaw, and we don't process our meat here. We take it, but let me tell you, if the like comes to it, uh, we will be able to feed. We have dairy cows as well. We have, you know what I mean? Like we are, and maybe I'm crazy to think that food sovereignty and security is the foundation of any security. Like that there's no, like, yes, an EMP can hit tomorrow and Bitcoin will disappear, but my dairy cows will not disappear.
Uh, that's not insane. That is completely rational and completely logical. But the problem is mainstream media will gaslight you to thinking that you're insane for feeling that way.
But there's not, my concern is these rural counties uh, are not prepared. If there's some sort of major event, and there's multiple major events that could happen that could cause a major power outage, and the United States power grid is not as secure as people believe it to be, these rural counties are not prepared for the influx of crazy people that are hungry coming out of the cities to try to solve what for survival. They're not.
And
And I believe that in these rural counties, we have to have some kind of plan. And if it's not with the county of Bandera or Kerr, I think at least in our local neighbors, we need to say, I have this many cows, this many sheep, this many goats. I have this ability for processing. I have a commercial kitchen on my ranch, and I am here if this happens. We also have solar, and so we will have power during the day with off-grid capability, but if it's EMP, we would not, because that would all be destroyed. But under other circumstances, that would. We have generators, but that would be destroyed if there was a. But we have these conversations, but we should know I have this many guns, I have this much ammo.
I'm not telling anybody how much guns and ammo I have. I might tell them what my food production looks like, but not
Or
what.
maybe just say that we have guns and ammo like that, because I feel like
You're
we
not in
don't.
California anymore, Molly. Everybody has guns now.
Okay, well, in California, nobody has guns. And literally, my husband put a picture of my 9-year-old son shooting on Instagram yesterday. And my husband is helping him and holding him steady. And people were like, too young, you're bad at teaching. And I was like, wow, like people are really thinking totally different than how we think.
Yeah. Those are the kind of people that think that if somebody's breaking into your house, all you have to do is hide under your bed, dial 911, and wait for the good guys to show up.
But there's no good guys that are going to show up. I live 45 minutes from anything. That's not a reality. But so aside from, let's be away from the guns, but I do think that you are only as secure as your neighbors are. So if something goes down, I think that we need to be together. But my experience is that most people, I truthfully is where I lived in California, many people were on I'm getting out of the system, getting on land. And that was kind of the mindset. And there was a lot of like kind of prepper talk, or how can we support? This is what we have. This is what you have. Da, 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 da. If this happens, I mean, we had a whole plan on my street in California that if something happened, whose equipment would go to the end of the road to block the road.
Okay.
And there was one road in and one road out, and that we had a plan that we would block the road at where the first turn is, so where there's no more ways to go around,
Right.
we would block the road. And we had like a plan in place in case it was necessary. And maybe that makes me a crazy person, or makes all of us on that street. But we were like, this is what's going to happen. These are the men that we're going to, call on right away. These are and my husband has a huge cat, and another guy has a huge like a bulldozer, and we were going to put the cat in the bulldozer to block the road, and we measured it, and we figured out that those two things will make it that there's a place where nobody would be able to drive around it. And that was our plan. Because it could be an earthquake, and all of a sudden there's no access to food, or not getting delivered. Not here in Texas, and it could be different things, different places. It could be, there's a lot of different things that could disrupt supply chains to the point that you will need to feed or take care of yourselves for a amount of time. And I don't know if it's 2 months, if it's 2 weeks, but I think that we do need to have plans in our own community for what we're going to do.
See, this is why I like you so much, because you speak my language, and it's like you're just pouring honey in my ear, talking about bringing communities together and food and like, regardless of what's coming down the line. I mean, we don't even need to talk about politics. Like, I am genuinely fearful for the next 120 days in this country and what's going on with the election. It could get really crazy. I mean, things could get real hot with China. Things could get real interesting in Ukraine with Russia. There's, we're, I think we're at one of the closest points in human history, like the Federation of Atomic Scientists, the one that keep the atomic clock. Like, I think
Yes.
we're at like 15 seconds to midnight. It's pretty scary, and I probably don't even want to go look and scare myself even worse. No matter what's coming down, okay, the way we're going to get through it, not as individuals, the way we're going to get through as a species is by having communities like yours, is by having people like you, people like Matt Cleffer, people that are super invested in their local area and building a local food culture and building a group of people that work together to keep food on their table and keep food security, because food security is national security. Without food security, we have no security. And like the security illusion that we have over food is so tenuous. You know, you've run a restaurant. Food truck comes once a week.
Yeah.
Okay. Food truck shows up every 2-3 days at a grocery store. And if those trucks stop running, it's 2 or 3 days, grocery stores are empty. And it's not going to take 3 days for people to understand that the shelves aren't going to be full again. That's going to happen like maybe early on day 2.
I think it's,
Well,
heard that Walmart said that they know that if their supply chain crashed for some reason, the amount of communities that wouldn't have food is like huge. I can't remember, but Walmart is the grocery store in many communities. So we all depend on these highly complex systems. And as these systems get more and more automated, the more we are relying on something that can break. And as a farmer, you know that you can automate whatever, but you also have to be prepared to have a way to do it if that automation doesn't work. For example, we use a trailer to move water to all of our animals when they're in remote pastures, and we move totes, like those totes with a forklift that you could do, so we can move 2 of those on a trailer. Now we chose that, and someone said, well, you can build a bigger tank on that trailer and it would be easier and blah blah blah. Yes, but these can be moved with a forklift. So if that trailer breaks, which right now we have a broken axle on that trailer, we're moving water with a skid steer or a tractor on a forklift. It's not ideal, but it works, because, and that's the non-automated version. And because our fencing is all electric, if it was really to the thing, we would move the cows over to where there's a pond or a tank. If that was the end, that if there was like no water coming out of the well or something. But you have to have a plan for all of these different things, because things can be automated all you want, but there will be a day where there's no air conditioning, where there's no water, and it's 100 and something degrees. There will be that day when your trees are wilting and you need to have a plan B. We also have a diesel pump in our pond. Or tank, as they call it here in Texas. And that
funny about that.
What?
They're funny about that.
You can't.
That's a dirt tank. That's not a pond. Whatever, fella. You call it whatever you want. I'm going to call it.
Mean? But I don't even know why is it a tank and not a pond? But anyways, I have a diesel tank. I have a diesel generator that can pump water anywhere on the ranch, can pump it up to the house, can pump it anywhere on the ranch, come that there was no power or there's no water coming from the wells for some reason. So I try to have these things, but if you don't, and my next goal is to get a tank, not a tank at the top of my property that we keep filled with water that can gravity feed down if there was really no diesel, no water, no nothing.
Yeah, I have a couple of those systems where I pump out of a spring or a pond, I pump uphill to a storage tank, and then we gravity down to stock tanks. Works fantastic. And we're speaking about automation. I kind of wish I had something to monitor my storage tank level, because I have the water system I'm using right now. I'm storing about 18,000 gallons of water, which is, and right now I've got a positive water. I make about 2,500 to 3,000 gallons extra water a day. That's how much I gain in my storage tank. Now, it's great having that much water stored if my pump goes down. Having that much storage volume is not so great when I have a valve come off of a tank
And
and
it's good.
18,000 gallons on the ground in a day. Then I've got to go work for 2 days. Like, I got to come out about 8 o'clock at night, hook the generator up, run the generator all night, come out first thing in the morning, refill it with fuel, let it run for another couple hours until the sun's high enough on the panels and start making power. Then as soon as the sun's like getting low in the sky about 6, I'll come out, fill the generator, then probably come back at midnight and refill the generator. I got to do that for 2 nights. Then I finally get my water. Then I finally get my storage back full. So there's trade-offs, but
Yes. That's right.
it does work really well. And if I was smart, after I got my 10,000 gallon tank full, I would just shut it off and just run on the smaller tank. And if I had a problem with the smaller tank, as soon as I got it fixed, I could just go open the valve on the big tank and I still have another 10,000 gallons in the system. I guess I'm not that smart most days.
Well, you could just put a valve between the two.
I did. I just don't think to go close it when it's full.
Oh, I see.
Man, this has been great. We gotta start wrapping up. What do you got? Tell me about your event Confluence. Tell me about that. And are you going to do another one?
Yes, Confluence, we're doing it in April. So we have a few events coming up. So I have a women's event coming up in September called Divine and Dangerous. It's kind of for that mama bear that got awakened during COVID. We're doing gun training, we're doing yoga work, we're doing leather working, fire starting, but we're also doing, some makeup stuff and like more girly things. So it's Divine and Dangerous, and just really celebrating all the qualities of the divine feminine, and also giving them the strength to take on things that they might be scared. I remember when I went to buy a gun in 2020, I walked into the gun store and I was like, looked, and he said, "Oh, come over here, girl. You're not the first hippie that decided since COVID you want to buy a gun."
Was that in Texas or in California?
California, but it was a Southerner that owns the shop and so I have since, bought a lot of guns and done gun training and all these things, but I didn't have a lot of agreement in my community to want to do that. So we're doing that. Then I have a homesteading course that's for a person that lives in the city and wants to milk a cow. That's the first week of October. And then in April, we're doing the Confluence event on the first weekend of April. And then you can stay for the next weekend. We're going to do a common law course, talking about the difference between, maritime law and common law, and doing a bunch of trainings about how we can take back our own sovereignty and be responsible for our own self, and not be a straw man and be commoditized by the government with our social security number. So we're having those 2 courses back to back in April. And we're also going to do a regenerative agriculture event in November. And so, yeah, we're doing quite a few events here on the farm in Texas. And if you have an event that you're interested in doing, please let us know. We have 40 beds on site, and we can bring in as many glamping tents. And Confluence is, focused on all areas of the way forward. So regenerative agriculture, moving away from pharmaceuticals and the medical industrial complex. We talk about frequency medicine. We talk about common law. We talk about financial independence, and some people talk about cryptocurrency and other ways to be more sovereign, and exiting and building and getting on land. All these things are part of the Confluence ethos. And so that's happens in April, and we've done it twice now, and we're doing it again in April.
Very cool.
And then my restaurants in California, if anybody's in California and is committed to regenerative agriculture, we are fully committed to regenerative agriculture. It's Stimple Creek, it's Force of Nature, it's Yanni Wang from Oatman's Flats, like all the food, and then also wild harvested meat. And so Sage Regenerative Kitchen in Los Angeles, Echo Park, and in Pasadena could use as much support as possible. It's really struggling through this transition right now.
If you can't get to California to eat at one of Mollie's restaurants, at least go like them on Facebook and maybe Instagram, and post something kind of supporting what they're doing, and try to push back against maybe some of the vegan narratives that are a little less enlightened than they think they are.
Thank you so much for having me on, and it's always a pleasure. And I'm still hoping you're going to travel through Texas sometime and come visit.
I really want to. I really want to come see what you got going on. And if I show up, just be prepared because I'm probably gonna stick a microphone on you and just put a recorder in my pocket and not think about it the rest of the day and see what it catches.
That'll be fun.
It'd be a lot of fun. Molly, thank you for your time, dear. I appreciate you.
Take care. Thank you so much.
Yep. You have a great day, gang. Have a great week.
Okay, bye-bye.
Hey there. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this week's episode. If it resonated with you, please share with a friend. Ranching Reboot is sponsored and supported by all my amazing patrons on patreon.com/redhillsranchers and the ads that run during the podcast. Support is also provided by my awesome partners and friends. Always check the show notes for links and coupon codes. Over the next few weeks, I have some great content coming up. Next week should be Ben Notterman from Snug Valley Farm to talk about his experience over the last year with no-fence GPS collars. Trevor Burrian is going to come back for another great episode that you won't want to miss. Thanks for listening. Come discuss the show along with the rest of the superfans on Discord, and don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. You can always send me feedback or guest suggestions through my website, redhillsrancher.com. I look forward to hearing from y'all, and that's it. We'll see you next week.